Andreas, you are an investor.
Yes.
And is this your first time at the Global Africa Business Summit? This conference?
Yes, it is, yes.
And so what brought you here today?
Investment opportunities. I speak at the UN at various subsections concerning African growth, and I spoke yesterday. I also spoke last year immediately after Mayor Eric Adams opened the UN, and I spoke on sustainable development for Africa using venture capital as a tool.
And so what is the investment opportunity that you see in Africa at the moment?
Well, maybe one quick caveat. These are my comments, not that of my employer. But I see it as clean energy. I think earlier we heard one of the representatives from Google speaking, and also Microsoft saying they would love to increase their market share, but only 600 out of 1.3 billion African inhabitants have electricity, which is kind of a necessity if you want to have digital economy, AI, web browsing, and the like. Mm-hmm. So I'm in the clean energy space. I do a lot of sourcing of my technology, be it chemical, thermal, mechanical, electrical engineers out of the technical universities of German-speaking Europe, Switzerland, Germany, Austria, and I use a lot of those technologies to put into play not only in Europe, also US and soon to be Africa.
And so as an investor who is based here in the US, what do you see as one of the biggest obstacles to investment in Africa?
This is not necessarily what I view as an obstacle, but typically investors in the West are a little concerned about graft and what they've heard about corruption. Also, the geopolitical risks in terms of coups and repudiation of Western debt does give some Westerners cause.
But I will also caveat that Africa is 54 countries, and so each country is different, and Africa as a continent, we talk about it as if it's a country.
Again, not necessarily my view, but I think it's very easy for sitting in your living room in Winnetka, Illinois, and someone says, hey, you should invest in Africa. They're not going to say, well, let's rank them. Nigeria hasn't had a coup in over 20 years. Dakar, well, who knows? They've got 4 or 5 different languages, or maybe 4 or 5 dozen languages, a disparity in terms of no clear majority in religion, and the colonists were Portuguese, and that may not be a great recipe for investment.
There's a lot that people could learn about specifics.
Clearly. It's very easy to say, walk away, oh, corruption.
Right.
When I can put my money into Google or Apple, you see the rub.
So when you come to a conference like this, where you're hearing from Africans and you're hearing from the private sector in Africa, is it surprising to you? Have you learnt a lot?
I learn a lot in just about any conference I go to. Africa as well. I mean, I've had the benefit of living and working in Asia, Europe, and the US. I've traveled to Africa only to the Gulf-rich, oil-rich countries and Egypt, so I haven't really got a taste for sub-Saharan. The people I meet, whether that's in government from the sub-Saharan countries or in private, seem to be extremely well educated and people I happily do business with. But again, I'm not the person I have to convince.
Absolutely. So you are doing business in Africa. You obviously see the potential there, or you are keen to expand interests.
Well, let me give you a little more background. So I work with some Finnish engineers who are in the clean energy transition space. They've developed a solar cooker, which is attached to solar panels, which allows people in sub-Saharan Africa to cook their meals, and they also have a jack so you can charge your cell phones. Why is this important? Without this kind of cooking mechanism, people in sub-Saharan Africa are going out into the forest, deforesting trees, creating more CO2 release, and so they've got a footprint. We've got them working with the WWF, worldwide, the koala bear people. Yeah, those people. So we have a footprint there, and these guys are really quite interesting because they're more doing this on a philanthropic basis, and I'm helping them also on a philanthropic basis. But the individual runs it, Ari Pisparin. He's like, I'm going to solve global warming without anybody else's help. I'm just doing it, and he's not stopping. He's made some great inroads, and he's someone you should probably really interview, in my view, if you get a chance.
So the theme of this conference is Unstoppable Africa.
Yes.
From what you've seen, heard, and learned, do you think Africa is unstoppable?
I think they have all the necessary ingredients. Probably the toughest part, which has been brought forward earlier today, has been the capital. And yes, they're certainly capital rich when it comes to human capital. In fact, yesterday I was speaking and I said that out of the top 6 countries in the world right now in terms of population, Nigeria is number 6, or not, the top 10, they're number 6, the only African country there. By the end of the century, 6 of the largest populated countries in the world will be African. The world is becoming African, the world will be African, and that's end of the century. And then I was told that my stats are wrong, that it's actually 2050 that the world will become African. I guess they're populating faster than I thought they were.
So, what would you like to see from this Gabi conference next year?
Well, I'd love to speak at it, for one.
What would you talk about?
I would talk about ways to provide better information to Western or Northern capital providers about this notion of graft.
And how should they do that? So tell us now, give us a preview.
I think you told me easier than an hour earlier that you need to kind of bifurcate or segregate countries, and you can't just lump them all into Africa as, you know, a graft haven. Again, not my words, but there are good opportunities for investment, and there are a lot of great natural resource situations, and there is this carbon, in effect, sequestration that's taking place naturally. But if you think about the 3 factors of production, so it's land, labor, capital, the most important, obviously, is labor, or the human element, and there'll be more Africans on this planet in 30, 50, 70 years than anybody else, so I think the human capital element is going to ultimately trump the rest. So I'm expecting that it's going to be a bullish situation overall.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.